So after the incredible display by Rangers fans last week at Dundee, Pyro has been a hotly debated topic again across our game. If you didn't see it, the entire away stand at Dens Park was filled with a red glow as around about 18 flares were lit across the section at the same time. It meant the game was suspended for about 18 minutes because it actually set off a fire alarm. It's a culture that's rife worldwide, quite celebrated worldwide too, but there are obviously and evidently still a lot of safety concerns surrounding it. So instead of the usual scare stories and uneducated debating that happens online, we want to move the conversation forward and look at whether safe pyro can ever be introduced. So we're joined now by Tommy Cordsen or Cordsen. Tommy, is that right?
Yes. Cordsen.
Cordsen, love it. You're a Danish expert on pyrotechnics and you have invented Tifontaine, a form of cold pyro. Can you just tell us about the product?
Yeah, the product is very simple. It's we are using, of course, another recipe than you use in the hot flares. The point with the hot flares, the emergency flares, is that they have to give a lot of smoke and they have to give a lot of light. And that makes them so damn hot, about 1200 degrees or something like that. And that's because the light you see at night on the sea, if you have an accident, a ship wreck or whatever, the smoke you can see at daylight when the helicopters are looking for survivors. So that's the reason why. But on the other hand, as I got into these problems here, I also began to see that some of it may be also a storm in a glass of water or a bubble in a pint, if you want. Mm-hmm. Because the Süddeutsche Zeitung had a statistics, and I think it was 2017 it was about, where they had 54 registered incidents with pyro. And I can assure you that no one has died, because then it would have been a much different debate. So that didn't happen. So there's been 54 incidents in a season. And through that season, I think it was 21 million people who has went to football in that season in the second and third Bundesliga. And that drove me to that conclusion that it must be more dangerous to bicycle to and from the stadium than being in the stadium filled with fireworks. I also have understood that the greatest problem, that was very much what we talked about in Denmark, that it was that the smoke disturbed the game. And that's something the broadcasting companies they can only put so many advertising minutes into it. And so the smoke really destroys that schedule. And that's more or less the reason for it in Denmark.
So does your product, does that cancel out a lot of these issues?
Yes, it does, because you have, unfortunately, and I don't appreciate that, I think it's stupid, where people have thrown these flares into the field, the football field. And if a steward has to pick up such a thing, which is 1200 degrees and can be very, very hot, that is not very nice. The Tifontaine simply has a plastic handle, and it doesn't get hot. And you can take a little beer or water or whatever and put into the flare, and it distinguishes completely. And it's not very heavy. I think it's about 250 grams or something. So if I had to be hit by something, I would prefer Tifontaine. And then you have the flare, which I know there's been debate, is it 500 degrees or is it 250 degrees? It has actually been measured very, very carefully by the University of Marseille. They have made a report on it. It says that it's something of the best which has been made of its kind. You know the fan organization Copa 90?
Yeah, I used to work for them.
Laura used to work for them, Tommy. Yeah.
They made an interview with me the day after the world presentation at Brondby Stadium. And then later on they made a video, and he actually puts a Tifontaine through his hair.
Look how high up I can hold it without burning my hand. A normal flare, this is completely impossible. Look at my hand going through this. It's not that hot. If I put it against my head, my hair doesn't light on fire.
I didn't ask him to do that. Nothing happens. But we have to be very, very clear here. You also always have to be very careful with fire. It's not something to play with. You have to be very careful, and safety always has to come first. But when that is said, here we actually have a product which is much less dangerous than anything else if pyro is dangerous.
Tommy, where does this compare in terms of the temperature of, say, a sparkler, which is a very common firework that people give to children?
It's very close to that, and it's a powder which is very different from gunpowder because it doesn't develop very much smoke. Cold pyro, it has a temperature, and you have to be careful, but it's a much lower temperature.
So a lot of people have also said, I mean, I don't know if you saw the scenes with Rangers fans at Dundee. It's quite a spectacle, but the smoke that it created, you mentioned that this cold pyro doesn't create as much smoke, but the fear factor in the UK certainly is that, you know, this could affect other people with maybe asthma and breathing difficulties. Do you think that this could be a step forward for people who enjoy pyro? Are these issues not as dangerous with your technology?
In Germany, they're always talking about what they call Feinstaub, very fine dust particles. And you are walking around in them every day because of diesel engines and petrol engines and all kind of stuff in the cities. So I don't think that you can put pyro in a stadium on a death certificate. I'm sorry to say, I don't think so. I think it's a little overdriven because if you stood it in 24 hours a day, okay. The point is that you use it in free air on a stadium, not indoors. It's not for indoors. It's only for outdoors. And the problem with smoke in a stadium depends very much on the stadium because the experiments we did in Brondby, I also used some time to look at how the stadium react because I'm quite sure that some changes could be made to a stadium so that the smoke more or less would disappear off itself. There's a lot of opportunities for doing things, and I think it will come because I think all this is about authorities, and authorities always they don't like changes because then they have to they need to change their procedures and all kind of stuff. So they want things to be as it always has been.
That idea of we have no way of regulating this, so we just don't want to entertain it at all.
The reason why authorities sometimes are a little weird, it's of course because some people complain about a lot of things. And that's the reason why authorities are as they are, because they have to look at all these complaints and sometimes they say, okay, then we have to stop that or do that or whatever, what case it is. It can be different, of course, what the issue is. But yeah, it's a difficult question, but I think cold pyro will come into the stadiums at a time because this fight cannot go on. No one get anything out of this.
Yeah, it's not going away. Tommy, you mentioned in the trials with Brondby, and that was what, around maybe 6-7 years ago. What's happened since then? What is the kind of barriers you've faced since then?
In Denmark, now I have to be a little careful, not be too rude to the authorities. No, because authorities are authorities and you cannot fight them. They will not go away. It's better to be a little nice and have some patience and wait and see what happens. But in Denmark, it happened so that Brondby sought a permit to do this. And it was with my name on it because I'm the pyrotechnician. And then we went on with it. And everything went so fine. I'm always worried up to such a thing as first time you do something with a product because what will happen and so on. But when I saw how Brondby's fans handled this, all my fear disappeared because it was so controlled. Everything was in its place. They did a tremendous work. And also, when I look at what they did and how they handled it, maybe it's not the same everywhere. I don't know. But in Brondby, I would not hesitate to give them fireworks if I was allowed by the authorities because it was so controlled and so well organized. So it can be done.
The football associations, UEFA themselves, government, police, they're all against it. And it feels like no matter what country you're in, they're not looking to be educated on this. But as we're all saying, it's not going to go away and the fans clearly want it. What is the next step here? How do we change the attitudes and the opinions high up and get this ball rolling again?
I think first of all it's important that the debate goes on, because the problems will not go away, and they have to find a solution. When we did the project in Brondby, the Swedish Football Association went into it also, and they bought a little over 1,000 Tifontaines in the 5 different colors. And so far I understand, it is standing somewhere in Sweden and has not been used, because suddenly the police simply decided to close all work with it. And the rumor said it was because they were angry at some of this fan culture, whatever. But if that is true, I of course cannot. That was what I was told by some people, but I don't know so much about Swedish football and football things, so I don't know if that's true. But there was an article in a newspaper, and it said that the police had decided simply completely to lock down all work with the Tifontaine, not because it was dangerous or because they have found some faults or whatever, something wrong, but simply because of just shutting it down. And that is probably a good example about how authorities react to new things, unfortunately. But if you go back in time and see when the first trains began to run, there actually was a law saying that a man with a red flag has to walk in front of the train to warn people that now the train is coming. And it also was something like that with cars. New things take time to be introduced somehow. As I said earlier, it doesn't help to shout at people, and they have to come to terms with the problems in the stadiums or whatever, and somehow I think it will come. I have heard that the German Bundestag has made a law which prohibits some of the clubs in Germany to try out cold pyro. But I hope it will succeed. I hope it will be used, and it can be used, and it's safe enough to be used. And I really has created this product because I think it's important to give new tools. Mm-hmm. I see, as I always has described it, I see the Tifontaine as a new pencil to paint with. And now it's the fans who has to be the Monet and the Van Goghs.